Hi, welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. It's good to have you with me in my kitchen. I know that sounds a little peculiar, but this is from where I'm recording this, or rather, this is from where Judy's Rubik is recording this on the other side of the screen. She's making all of the technical stuff work well so that I look at least as good as I possibly can. So thank you, Judy, once again. I must admit that in this time of increasing infection rates, even here in Kincardine, alarmingly, we need humor to lighten the load. Of course, some puns can be perceived as more of an acquired taste. For example, consider this cartoon. As bad as that one is, here's another bird-oriented pun. With many of us locking ourselves down we are locking ourselves down more carefully recently. Living so closely together as couples can give rise to differences of opinion. Nevertheless, health protocols are essential. When we are trying to keep our physical distance, signs are an important avenue of communication. Clarity, however, in how you write the signs is important so that they don't lead you astray. Then again, working at home has its own challenges. Trying to keep your kids entertained can lead to injury from stray Legos. Such a reality could lead to changes in the least expected places. And it really doesn't have to be said, but I'm going to say it anywhere. 2020 has been a tough year. So here's one way of looking at it. During our 2020 pandemic isolation, some in our congregation have taken time to ponder philosophically about creation alive all around us. Ken Gannett, pictured here with his beloved wife Fran, sent me this reflection 8 months into his isolation during this pandemic. He writes in part, I've been looking out in our backyard often. The trunk of the trees is the foundation of God. The limbs, small and large, is God reaching out to us. The leaves that are falling with wonderful colors are wonderful to watch. Some float in the sky like birds, some float for a long time. Some like to float for a short time and then speed up to land on the grass. Some like to spiral to the ground slowly and land like a helicopter. They all lay on the ground until they are gathered up and buried in the landfill. In the spring, new leaves begin to grow with different colors of green to give us shade and a place for the birds to land on to make a home for their baby birds. Then the circle starts again. At this time, because of the virus, it is a pleasure to look out the window and see the work of God. What a wonderfully peaceful perspective. Ken is teaching me to take each moment in stride, opening my heart to perceive God's presence in the midst of it all, to embrace the ebbs and flows of time, of incident, of circumstance. I have spoken to many in our community of faith, and each person has shared with me their struggles with living in the midst of a pandemic. With Christmas coming while the second wave strikes harder than the first wave, people are sorrowful that they will be unlikely to get together for Christmas in person. Others deeply miss being able to attend worship services in person to see one another face to face, to have the luxury of catching up with one another without a screen mediating. Others are feeling more and more lonely as the days, weeks, and months march on. Still, more are wrestling with depression, living one moment to the next, hoping for relief from this seemingly never-ending ordeal. Still others voice their disgust with those who don't follow the health protocols to keep each other safe from infection. They shake their heads at the anti-mask protests in Aylmer and in St. Thomas in southwestern Ontario, not to mention in larger centers. Don't they understand that the restrictions we are currently experiencing are mild compared to what we will have to endure if we don't follow the medical advice of our public health authorities? The level of frustration matches mine, actually, and I'm not proud of that. For example, a little more than 2 weeks ago, over 75,000 bikers gathered in Port Dover, with few wearing masks, despite Premier Ford imploring them to stay away and to respect the safety of others as well as one another. Then, like Ken is teaching me, I take a breath. I pause, considering how Jesus might have dealt with his feelings. Preaching that we are to love our neighbor, welcome the stranger, and stand up for the marginalized does not mean you are making political statements. It means you are making biblical statements. After all, Jesus was prophetic and challenged everyone to examine more closely how they act. Indeed, how we act affects others around us. But I also think that Jesus would have challenged me to consider going even deeper. Stop being afraid of what can go wrong. Start being excited about what can go right. Instead of acting out angrily in my frustration, perhaps it is wiser to treat those with whom I so strongly disagree with grace, with compassion, and by trying to see them as people just like me. If I try to look beyond their choices and how their actions affect me and those I love, maybe, like the caterpillar transforming into a butterfly, change is possible if I choose to love them. Maybe Jesus is whispering to me that change never happens unless I choose to create a relationship that treats them as worthy of my loving. That is certainly not an easy task. Here is an example of how we can go above and beyond just by living a good life. When we sacrificially love even strangers, miracles can lead to transformation, not just of the stranger we befriend, but for ourselves and for those around us.
Any electrician can flip a switch, but only John Kinney of Woburn, Massachusetts.
It appears that we've lost access to the video, but let me explain what the video was demonstrating. This electrician, John, went to a woman's house because she had contacted him and contracted him to do a slight electrical repair. When he arrived at her home, this little old lady, slight and frail, was living in a house that was run down. So run down, in fact, that it was dangerous. So what John the electrician did was he contacted a lot of his contractor buddies, people with whom he had worked on projects many, many times, and they went to work repairing her roof, repairing her plumbing, even replacing some of the structural damage that had happened over the decades. And through it all, she would cook for them, she would care for them, and they developed relationships that otherwise would never have taken place. In fact, what John is now doing is he is dedicating part of his week, and so are his contracting friends, to going around in their town and helping other people like that little old lady to repair their homes when they can't afford to pay for it. And the community has gathered together and started to subsidize all of these projects. It's an incredible way that one small act of kindness, one willingness to risk a relationship with a stranger, transforms the world and transforms one another. You see, Jesus and his disciples taught us this same thing. When Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees as they presented him with a woman caught in adultery, they tested him by asking what judgment was necessary. They were all ready to stone her to death as the law of Moses required, but Jesus took a really long time to respond, drawing in the sand while crouched down, forcing the stone-bearing crowd to look at this terrified, vulnerable woman. Then he told that the one of them without sin should cast the first stone. The crowd began to see themselves in the woman, subsequently melting away as they dropped their stones. Another example is when Saul of Tarsus arrived in Damascus. He had gained a deserved reputation as a terrifying bully, arresting the followers of the way of Jesus all over the region. He was struck blind after having a vision of the risen Christ. Saul's guards escorted him into town, unsure what else to do. Saul was now a lost, broken man. However, to the nascent Christians in Damascus, he was still a life-threatening presence. When Ananias received a vision from God that he was to go to Saul and restore Saul's vision, Ananias protested to God that Saul was basically a terrorist. How could the risk be worth it? Still, Ananias went, healed Saul of his blindness, and took the time and the patience to teach Saul about the good news of the risen Christ. Notice how both of these biblical stories show us the way of love is also one of risk, of sacrifice. There was an anthropologist who invited the children from a South African tribe to play a game. He placed a basket of fruit near the tree and announced to the children, "The one of you who reaches the tree first will be rewarded with all the sweet fruits." When he signaled to the children to start the race, they locked their hands tightly together and ran. And then they all sat together and enjoyed the delicious fruit as one. The astonished anthropologist asked the children why they all ran as one, because each of them could have enjoyed the fruit for themselves to the exclusion of others. The children replied, "Ubuntu." It is possible for one to be happy if everyone else is sad. Ubuntu is their language, means I exist because we exist. True humanity requires a community that loves one another and shares. Another example is from the life of Nelson Mandela. Remember that before he was imprisoned, Mandela was the leader of the violent resistance movement against apartheid called the African National Congress, the ANC. When in prison, Mandela was changed, transformed, and became a man of peace. After Mandela became president of South Africa, he went for a walk in the city with a few of his bodyguards. They stopped to sit in one of the most central restaurants, in the town's most central restaurant, for a meal. The waiter rushed over to serve them, ignoring the man who had been there before them. Once their meal arrived, Mandela gestured to one of his bodyguards to invite that man to share their meal. Throughout the meal, the man's hands shook so badly that at times he could barely eat. Once the meal was complete, the man shook Mandela's hand and hurried away. The bodyguard who had invited the man remarked that he must have been very ill. Mandela replied, "Not at all. You see, that man was one of my jailers at Robben Island. Often, after one of my torture sessions, I cried out for water. He would laugh at me, and instead of giving me water, he would urinate on my head." That man wasn't sick. He was terrified that I would have treated him like he treated me now that I am president. But I'm not like that. Minds that seek revenge destroy states, while those that seek reconciliation build nations. So then, when we feel frustration, anger, or rage at the selfishness of those ignoring the wisdom of the protocols our public health authorities are mandating, we need to take the time and the risk to engage with them as human beings. Only then can transformation truly be possible. Only then are we sacrificing our own peace of mind for the cause of self-giving. It is challenging, it is daring, it is powerful, and it is worth it. It is the circle of life so that we can lose our anger just as trees lose their leaves. God will stir life within us once again so that green new leaves of new life can yet unfurl within us. Thanks be to God for that gift of grace. I want to share one last video with you. It is a cover of a song written by Alicia Keys. In fact, I used Alicia's original video in the Fireside chat recorded on April 28th, early in the pandemic. It is sung by the One Voice Children's Choir. I want to use this as a prayer of thanksgiving to all of you, to everyone who is struggling with this pandemic, with the isolation, with the restrictive health protocols, with the loneliness, with the depression, with the overwork, with the risks of having to work on the front lines, with the constant and often overwhelming duties of parenting, with the incessant changes required when teaching school, with the dangerous demands of working in healthcare, with the terrifying prospects of being a small business owner, with the demands as first responders, with the indoor dangers of working in restaurants, or with the often unpraised at fast food outlets, or as truckers, or as grocery store workers, or as retail workers. There are so many more who deserve our care, our compassion, and our love. This is my prayer of thanks to all of you.
You're the engine that makes all things go, and you're always in disguise, my hero. I see your light in the dark, smile on my face when we all know it's hard. There's no way to ever pay you back. Bless your heart, know I love you for that. Honest and selfless, I don't know if this helps it, but good job, you're doing a good job, a good job. You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter, 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 yeah. You're doing a good job, a good job. You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter, 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 yeah.
6 in the morning, as soon as you walk through that door, everyone needs you again. The world's out of order, it's not a sound when you're not around.
All day on your feet, hard to keep that energy. I know when it feels like the end of the road, you don't let go, you just press forward. You're the engine that makes all things go, go. Always in disguise, my hero. I see a light in the dark, smile in my face when we all know it's hard. There's no way to ever pay you back. Bless your heart, oh, I love you for that. Honest and selfless. I don't know if this helps it, but
Good job, you're doing a good job, a good job.
good job.
You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter, matter.
Good job.
You're doing a good job, a good job.
Yeah.
You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter.
Yeah.
The mothers, the fathers, the teachers that reach us, strangers to friends that show up in the end. From the bottom to the top, the listeners that hear us, this is for you.
You make me feel it.
You're doing a good job, a good job. You're doing a good job, don't get too down. The world needs you now. Know that you matter.
Thank you so much to our first responders, our healthcare workers, our mothers.
Thank you to our moms and our dads. Thank you to our teachers who've helped us.
We know it's been hard, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job.
The fathers, the teachers that read.
I would consider this not only a prayer of thanks to all of you, but consider this a prayer God makes to all of us. Every little step, every little way we try and make a difference is indeed a good and faithful job. Our church building is still closed and likely will be for some time to come. Nevertheless, I want to thank you so much for all the feedback I've received from those of you who are making use of these fireside chats, but also making use of our live streamed and recorded Sunday services. Because we are digitally connected, we are able to look after the most vulnerable among us more safely. Thank you for your patience in the midst of this all. And a big thank you once again to Terry Boyd, who takes the recording of these videos and uploads them to our YouTube channel. Thank you, Terry. It makes a big difference. So, may you go as those who are gathered by the sender of love, upheld by the one who came in love, sent out in the power of love. Go in peace. Until next week's Fireside Chat, be well and stay safe. Goodbye.